The expectations for Michigan football are palpable. I think everybody comes into this year with the expectation that they're going to be a pretty damn good football team. And when you think about all the prognosticators, all the shock jocks, they're talking about Bryce Underwood, young player. He's not going to be, good in his first year. Obviously, when you think about a freshman quarterback, you think about a quarterback that is going to need some help. And along the lines, he's going to need some help from the coaches. He's going to need help from his offensive line, his wide receivers, his tight ends, his running backs. And when I look at the Michigan Wolverines, Justice Haynes, the kid from Alabama who they got as a transfer, I think he could be very, very good with this team. But there are questions for the Michigan Wolverines in terms of the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, I have no questions about the defensive side of the ball. I think the defensive side, if there's any questions that you have, okay, how are you going to get better at corner? And how are you going to replace Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant? That's going to be very, very hard. But Michigan has shown a ability to, always figure out a way. I think when Hutchinson left, people were like, when Hutch and Jabo leave, what are they going to do? They just cranked out Josiah Stewart. They just cranked out, guys like that. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what they do on the defensive side of the ball because I think the defensive side of the ball is going to be really good. On the offensive side of the ball, though, when we think about Michigan football in a broad spectrum, right? We think about Michigan football like, Braylon Edwards, Mario Manningham, Jeremy Gallen, Roy Roundtree, Junior Hemingway. I remember Junior Hemingway had a couple good years. Nico Collins, Tariq Black. There's been a lot of great tight ends in Michigan's history, but the past couple of years, they've had the great tight end. Colston Loveland, obviously you go back to Jake Butt. You go back to, God, you can go back days for the tight ends. But for a while, it doesn't seem like they've had the wide receivers. And the kid they got from Indiana, Donovan McCauley, I think he could be a really useful weapon for Bryce Underwood. And when we talk about Bryce Underwood, a lot is going to be made that it's going to be his team, right? A lot is going to be made that he needs to do it. But the reality situation is when you're a freshman quarterback, the thing that helps you out the most is having that wide receiver, the guy that you can go to. And, it's either him or it's Samaj Morgan. Someone's going to have to step up. And if it's not those two, who is it? I think McCauley, I think he's going to be a very fine shot to do that. But when you think about it from a standpoint of realistically, who can step up? And look, Bryce Underwood's going to need it because that is one of the main questions for the Michigan Wolverines. Now, I think in the backfield with Justice Haynes and the running back stable that they got, I think they're going to be fine. Who replaces Colston Loveland? That's a big shoes to fill, but Michigan has shown the propensity to continue to replace tight ends. So, but for the last couple of years, it's just been who's been a wide receiver, you go back to Andrew Anthony, all those guys. None of them were really that big name. None of them were like the Nico Collins. None of them were like the Mario Manningham, Braylon Edwards. And I would say the most impactful wide receiver is probably you would have to go back to Manningham. I mean, that's just how far you have to go back. But there's also another catch to this because on the offensive side of the ball, Sharon Moore brought in Chip Lindsey from, he brought in Chip Lindsey after the passing game was just absolutely terrible. It was one of the worst in college football. And what he's tasked with doing right now, he's tasked with not only is there weapons on the outside, like the wide receivers, an issue, but, you just lost the kid, Andrew Bobola. I might have butchered his name a little bit, but you lost him. He was figured to start. And now you're asked to, I don't know, your offensive line is going to be an issue because, and it could be better, but we have to come and see. Let's see. The first couple games, we're going to get to see who they are. When they go to Oklahoma, I think that's a good test for that offensive line. Obviously, New Mexico is not going to be much of a test, but there's things that need to be questioned at Michigan. And the questions that are there, it's not really questions. It's can they get them set? Can they get them to a standard of what we want from our team? Can we get Bryce Underwood in the best total situation that we're going to help? We're going to give this guy every tool he needs to succeed. Because when people talk about a guy like Trevor Lawrence, right? They bring up him as a freshman phenom, and Trevor Lawrence was good, right? But his cast of characters he had around him was even better. So when you think about it from that standpoint, that Bryce Underwood is coming into a situation, the wide receivers are virtually unknown how they're going to fit into the offense, and the offensive line is unknown. And going back a couple years, you had the Joe Moore Award winners. Sharon Moore is an offensive line coach. He's tasked with being the guy who can get this offensive line to the next level. And for his quarterback to reach the next level, I think you're gonna have to have the offensive line be a ton better. And however that takes in this season, however, if it takes 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, you just want to play your best ball at the end because the schedule that you have, it's not that tough. You go play Oklahoma, you play USC, and then you play Ohio State at the end. There's no Penn State. So Michigan really lucked out there because Penn State's figured to be a good team, but it just buys you more time. When you get to Michigan State, that's probably a game that it's gonna be tough because it's an in-state rivalry. I think but the reality of the situation is this: like you're gonna go out there, and for the first couple games, I mean, you're gonna have Oklahoma, and then you're gonna get a chance to really work on some things. And if you can win that Oklahoma game, I mean, the path to the playoffs is there in front of you. It really is. But the path to the playoffs for the Michigan Wolverines starts at the offensive line, figuring out who's going to be there, and the path to the Bryce Underwood reaching his full potential is the wide receiver. Does McCauley turn into someone that we expect? Does Samaj Morgan turn into someone that we thought was going to turn into a good wide receiver, or is it someone else? And if it's someone else, that would be nice too. But they got time to figure it out. Obviously, the Oklahoma game on the road is going to be a tough game, but if you win that, the path to the playoffs is right there for the Michigan Wolverines, right there, because they got enough time to figure things out. Bryce Underwood's got enough time to figure things out with his cast and everything. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch. And as always, we're going to do the season preview on Monday. So if you're a Michigan fan, we will have your season preview out Monday morning exactly. Michigan State's will be there too, and then Detroit Lions preview will be going into Labor Day. We'll see you in the next video of JC Sports. I'll see you in the next video to talk more Michigan football here on JC Sports.